Hello and welcome to this short video titled The Key Equation, where I talk over a concept that I use to help my clients to break the all or nothing mindset that is holding them back from achieving their results within my T3 Fat Loss method. And what we want to focus on is essentially, why don't we want the all or nothing mindset? Well, the all or nothing just can't be sustained. If you are running at 100% with everything, you will burn out. So you may be able to go a week, 2 weeks, a month, 2 months, whatever, of hitting your exercise daily, hitting your crazy low calorie limit daily, hitting your steps, getting your water, working, socializing, all of that kind of stuff. But it's not sustainable. And if it's not sustainable, we're not going to get a long-term result. Obviously, on the other side of that as well, if we're doing nothing, obviously, we'll not get the result we're after. On top of that, all or nothing tends to lead to restriction. If we go all in, especially when we talk about food, for example, if we go all in and saying I'm making a positive change with my health, not only does it mean that we're going strict with calorie limits and we're tracking everything, or we're tracking sins, points, whatever, but also we're cutting things out. So we say that's bad. So I'm not having chocolate, that's gone. I'm not having alcohol, that's gone, because I'm being good. The only issue is, when you use restriction as the main plan, it'll backfire on you. Because it is human nature to want the things that we can't have. So as soon as you say, that is off limits, your mind is going to be going, well, I want it. And there's only going to be so long until the willpower gives out, you burn out, like I mentioned in the point number one, and you'll end up eating the food that you restrict. And thirdly, especially when we look at calorie intake and calorie deficits and all that kind of stuff, working on a day-to-day basis is limiting. If we say that I've got to hit this number this day with regards to my calories, then it starts reducing what you can have. You start looking at things and you look at food as a means to hit your calorie limit, rather than actually enjoying the damn thing, which is what we want when we want to enjoy it. And it can transfer over to exercise as well. If we go on a day-by-day basis and say, okay, well, this day's got to be exercise, or I've got to exercise Monday all the way through to Friday. And then if you don't do it, you kind of think, oh, well, I've ruined this day. Crap. I may as well give up for the rest of the week, because I've not been able to do it all, so I'm going to do nothing. So this is why we don't want the all or nothing mindset. But what can happen if we take ourselves away from it and break free from it? You can bring back flexibility. And bringing back flexibility is massively important, because when we have flexibility, we have enjoyment, we have variety, all these things. And we also have leniency. When we have leniency, we don't have the feelings of guilt that is so strongly associated with the all or nothing. And when we remove guilt from the process, as I said, everything becomes a hell of a lot more enjoyable. On top of that, you will enjoy your food and lifestyle more. You won't need to look at food from a calorie deficit perspective and say, well, I can't have this today because I've got X amount of calories and I can't afford it on my calorie limit. And it'll be the same with your lifestyle. You'll no longer look at things and be like, well, I can't go out for drinks with my friends this weekend because I'm going out next weekend. If I do it next weekend, I'm going to eat lots, and if I eat lots, it's going to derail my week because I've not been able to go all in. I'm just going to skip it. We avoid that because we learn how to manage everything within this mindset of the key equation. And finally, doing these two things will help you achieve a result that you can sustain. You can achieve a result with the all or nothing mindset. As I say, you can go for maybe 2-3 months, whatever, being all in and absolutely smashing it. But it's not a sustainable result. It's not something that you can do for the rest of your life, because that's how we want to define the result. Can I get the result doing something that I'll enjoy doing for the rest of my life? If the answer is yes, then it's it's a result you can sustain. So how do we break free from all or nothing mindset? Well, that's with the key equation, and let's have a look at it. So you might already know this. When it comes to fat loss, and I'm talking about fat loss here because traditionally when people look at improving their health, improving their fitness, there's some aspect of weight loss, there's some aspect of fat loss that is going to come alongside that. So if we are looking at this key equation, which predominantly focuses on the nutrition side of things, fat loss will be determined by calories out being greater than calories in. So essentially being in a calorie deficit, burning off more calories than you consume. Now, that is a fact. If you are not in a calorie deficit, you can't burn fat. I don't want you to mistake this as me saying you have to be, or you being in a calorie deficit will mean you are burning fat. There's a lot more to it. There's things that are a lot more complex when it comes to the nutrition side of things, but that's too much for me to go into today. The main thing is that we do, if we want to lose fat, if we want to lose weight, we do have to be in a calorie deficit. However, that is not the key equation. We know this. We know that we need to be in a calorie deficit, so I'm not telling you something that you don't already know. The key equation is actually living by the 80-20 rule. And this 80-20 rule it covers pretty much every aspect of life. I'm going to focus on nutrition in this, but it covers the exercise, it covers your lifestyle, work, time with family, sleep, downtime, whatever. We live by the 80-20 rule. So what is the 80-20 rule? Essentially, the 80-20 rule is doing what you need to do in order to get your result 80% of the time. So if that's being in a calorie deficit, be in a calorie deficit 80% of the time. If that's getting 4 workouts in a week, that's getting 4 workouts in a week 80% of the time. If it's getting 7.5 hours of sleep, do that 80% of the time. If it's about being focused at work and making sure you've got all your distractions put away, do that 80% of the time. Essentially, do what is necessary to achieve the result 80% of the time, and you will achieve the result. You don't need perfection. You don't need to be on plan constantly. Essentially, you just need to be good enough. Because when we're good enough, we give ourselves so much leeway. If we aim for perfection, eventually something goes. And then we see ourselves as failures. But if we just want to be good enough, that's so much easier, so much more sustainable. So what is good enough? Obviously, this is always dependent on you. It's dependent on your goals. But typically, if we're looking from this improved health, reduced weight, reduced fat perspective, then good enough is getting some form of exercise in on a regular basis. Ideally, a combination of resistance work and regular steps. But as I say, that's an ideal. If you hate resistance work, or you just don't want to go for a walk, can you get something in that you enjoy, or that is easier for you to fit in at that moment on a regular basis? That's being good enough. Maybe we don't hit the ideal, but we do something good enough. The other one is to be aware of your food intake. So hitting a sustainable calorie target that's under your maintenance. So being in a calorie deficit, but picking a target that you can sustain, that you don't feel like you're killing yourself to hit. And doing that and hitting that sustainable calorie target 80% of the time. That's good enough. And getting consistency with your sleep routine, staying hydrated, both of these will massively contribute to successful health goals. But again, we just need to be good enough for most of the time. And in this, I'm going to focus predominantly on the intake side of things. So I know I've mentioned a few bits, but I'm just going to focus on nutrition for now. And when it comes to being good enough and giving yourself the flexibility when it comes to nutrition, we want to look at daily versus weekly tracking. So using this example here, maintenance calories in this example are 2,000. That means if that person was to consume 2,000 calories every single day, they would stay exactly where they are. Now, people seem to think that I need to be in X amount to be a deficit, like, and then once they set that limit, they're really restrictive. But that's not the case. Like 1900 is a deficit, 1750 is a deficit, 1500, 1250. These are all deficits. For this one, the most manageable deficit is 1750. It's 250 below maintenance, so over time we'll get a decent result. It'll be just quick enough for us to kind of be motivated by the results, but not so low that we can't sustain it. The thing to remember here, again, thinking being good enough, that 1750 is not now your maintenance limit. So if you set 1750 as a target, but you have a day where you're at 1850, who cares? It's still 150 of a deficit. It's still good enough. However, when we look at these sort of things, I coach my clients to look at things in a weekly perspective rather than daily. The reason being, if we look at daily, and using the example that we've just picked of the 1750 limit, there's a number of things that come with this. So we've got that constant pressure to be under. As I mentioned earlier, we start looking at food from a calorie perspective rather than enjoyment. So we start buying 0% fat yogurt. We start buying skinny whip bars because we need to be under calories. So we've got to make these substitutes that are frankly crap in comparison to the original product. But I'm eating it anyway because to get my result, I need to be at my 1750 limit. They say you've got that pressure to be under, which limits your food choices, and in general, it's more limiting because it starts impacting your social life. So we start looking at things and saying, okay, I can't have this takeaway because I've got a 1750 limit. If I have a takeaway, that's going to be 1500. I can't go out for drinks with my friends because these drinks are going to be 800 calories and that doesn't leave me enough for food and I'm probably going to want to eat after, so I'm just not going to do it. Or I go do it but I feel guilty for doing it, which is not a way of living either. So what is the alternative? Well, the alternative is weekly tracking. And it's essentially the same thing. We're keeping the same limits. But instead of looking at a daily limit of 1750, we're timesing it by 7 and getting a weekly limit of 12,250. And by doing this, it takes the pressure off individual days. It means we can be more flexible with our food choices, more flexible with our lifestyle, and make food choices based on enjoyment. Which in turn, by making it more flexible, making it easier, making it more enjoyable, we're going to be able to sustain it. And because we sustain it and we get that consistency, it means that we're going to get the result. So you might be wondering how weekly calories work. Well, it is still the same. You still track from a day-to-day basis, but you're no longer focused on that 1750 limit for that day. You're focused on the 12,250 limit for the week. And we can separate that down. And just remembering our 80-20 rule, we can look at how that might look. For example, 80% of a single week is 6 days. So if you can do what is necessary and you can be good enough for 80% of the week, that means 6 days you're hitting that 1750. And then for your 20%, you just say, you know what, okay, I'll go up to my maintenance today. Let's just call it maintenance. It's really easy. So you've done 80% good enough, 20% where you enjoy yourself a little bit more. Over the course of a week, that comes to 12,500 calories. It's still 1,500 calories under your maintenance, 1,500 calorie deficit. And this is just being really specific with the numbers and saying, okay, we hit exactly 1750 for 6 days, we hit 1 day of 2,000. We can do things like so much different with this. We can maybe say, you know what, for 5 days I'm going to go for 1,600 and be good enough there. And then I can use the rest of my calories of the weekend. At the end of the day, if you break things down into a weekly perspective, it becomes so much easier to hit that 80% because actually you can manipulate your whole week so that you get more calories on certain days than others and yet still be hitting that target that is good enough. But either way, when you look at it as 80% of the time being good enough, i.e. our calorie deficit, 20% of the time we are enjoying ourselves more, so maybe hitting maintenance calories. Say over a week you work to a 1,500 calorie deficit. Over the course of a month, that's 6,000 calories that you are in a deficit while still having that enjoyment, still having that flexibility. Over a year, 73,000 calories as a deficit, which roughly works out at 20 pounds of fat loss. Now, you may think a stone and a half is not a massive amount to lose in a year, but if you think of it in the perspective of, would I rather lose a stone and a half in a year, having gone on holiday and enjoyed myself, having enjoyed Christmas, not missed out on any social occasions, and enjoyed my food choices? Or would I rather lose a stone and a half in 2 months, having skipped out on social occasions, eating chicken, rice, and broccoli for every meal 3 times a day, and running yourself into the ground? I know which one I'd rather pick. I'd rather pick the one that takes longer, but I can sustain. Hopefully you have found this useful. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to get in touch. Always happy to answer anything specific with regards to the key equation. Anything that you might want to know a little bit more about outside of the key equation. And if you would like to learn more about the T3 fat loss method and how I coach my clients to improve their health, improve their self-confidence, and improve their energy and focus without restricting their food or lifestyle choices, then just drop me a message